Welcome to Monarchist Minute. I am Charles York. Joining me tonight are Victor Smith, William Stout, and Darth Kilhoun over at the Darth Kilhoun YouTube channel. Very creative. Tonight we have about four topics of discussion. The first and foremost of which being Biden's new gun control. Yay! Yay! Uh,
Yay.
Given that the rules that I've written state that the person who gives the intro is the one who proposed the first topic, I'll give a little summation. The Biden administration has decided to bypass Congress, and it's very funny
Again.
that, yeah, no, yes, he even specifically said when he gave the announcement that he's doing this because he can't get it past Congress, which is just okay, okay. Obviously, I'm not the biggest proponent of the Constitution, but when you take an oath, when you're a politician who takes an oath to defend and uphold that Constitution, it sort of seems hypocritical to just subvert the legal processes of said Constitution. So part of this would change the definition of a receiver, which was defined by a bill. So you can't just use regulatory powers to define a bill. But anyways, the main aim of the gun control legislation, or not even legislation, is to crack down on what are being referred to as ghost guns. Now, what everybody used to think when they thought of ghost guns were those 80% that you could buy off the internet and still can for the moment, where it's not legally a firearm until you actually mill it out, and it's legal assuming that that firearm does not violate the National Firearms Act. Don't take legal advice from us because we're a bunch of people on the internet. We're not lawyers. Um, it's legal to make your own firearms, assuming that they don't violate the National Firearms Act. So as long as you're not making your own machine gun or short-barreled rifle or suppressor, you can make any firearm you want, or anything else that falls under the NFA. You can't make. So that's what everybody wants you to think of when you think of ghost guns. But the problem is the Biden administration has sort of expanded that definition to include things that are already illegal or banning 80% won't solve. Like for example, uh, defacing the serial number on a stolen firearm. Uh, that's been illegal already since 1964, and maybe even earlier in some states, but I think it became federally illegal in 64. So this rule change will do literally nothing for that. And then also the fact that many of the firearms are just straight up stolen. I mean, how many I would legitimately like to know how many criminals are actually going through the process of buying an 80% AR-15 receiver, which by the way, most or an 80% pistol receiver most likely because most crimes are committed with handguns, not most gun crimes committed with handguns, not rifles because cumbersome. Uh, how many people are actually going through the hassle of waiting for that to show up, milling it out, when depending on the neighborhood you're in, you can just pretty easily find one for a couple $100 that's been stolen for 10 years, and the lawful owner has basically given up hope of ever getting it back. I mean, that's just, I don't know, it's stupid.
There
So,
are a lot of times that legally purchased guns end up on the black market too. Like I was watching a documentary about drug trafficking in Chicago, and apparently what they will do is they'll run guns from Indiana into Chicago because gun laws are a lot weaker in
oh,
Chicago. So it's
to be stronger.
yeah.
No, well, yeah, and oh, and the whole guns being used for illegal activities thing. One of Biden also same day picked his new nominee because a lot of the pro gun people helped stop his previous nominee for the head of the ATF, or as Biden likes to call it, the AFT for some reason. He keeps making that mistake. He keeps making that mistake over and over again, and I have absolutely no idea why.
Speaking
Uh,
of ATF, did you hear a while back that the ATF is apparently getting ready to get audited by Congress for basically all of the bull crap they've been trying to pull?
Oh, like that. That's gonna. I don't think that's gonna happen. The ATF has already been doing this thing where they're essentially legislating for themselves, which is just absolutely ridiculous. But
They're about to get into a lot of trouble for that, though.
I'd like to see the day.
You and
Uh,
me.
no, if it, the new head of the ETF was an advisor under who was Obama's Barr? Was he the DOJ or something? Anyways, well,
Was Trump.
what?
Barr was Trump. Obama's
Oh,
DOJ was Holder.
Holder. Maybe it wasn't Holder, but anyways, he's tangentially related to somebody. But his new pick, Biden's new ATF pick, is tangentially related to somebody who was involved in Operation Fast and Furious, which I don't know if you want to name your movies after your
You mean
operations
leveling
after
around?
movies, but the weapons that Operation Fast and Furious involves shipping weapons to the cartels, and some of those weapons were used in the and resulted in the deaths of several American citizens. So yeah, I don't think the government should be trusted when it comes to common sense regulation. Anyways, I've been talking. I'll let Darth or somebody else speak.
Um, I mean, I really don't know the exact minutia of the regulation off the top of my hand, but I mean, every single time they bring out like these executive orders, like in Obama's days, it was literally just regulations that already existed that the Dems are too lazy to honestly look into it, so it just adds a whole nother level of bureaucracy to do essentially the same thing, making the process actually more difficult on the system to track firearms and to track firearm owners and the various registries you got to go through and licenses you have to have depending on the state, etc. So I just see every time I hear this, I'm like, oh boy, it's gonna make it twice as hard to purchase a firearm whenever you want because, well, they added a whole other bureaucracy on top of the existing bureaucracy.
Yeah,
And
it's
like that for other organizations in the federal government too. Like the IRS has a similar problem where they'll just institute new laws or executive orders will be issued, and it'll just layer on top of layer on top of layer of already existing and similar laws and regulation, and it just piles on top of each other, and that's why it's so hard to reform anything because you have to go through years and years and years of redundant and irrelevant laws that have been piled on top of each other.
who
You
was
know,
who
that
was
this
that?
is why we could just use a Franco guy right now. We could really reform things quick with a guy like him.
I mean,
Oh, okay. So
honestly,
moving on.
no. I mean, I don't know. Franco wasn't really as I don't think Franco was as bad as everybody says he was. But
Oh,
anyways, all I'm saying
He was
is,
awesome.
well, I mean,
All
I
right.
don't know.
And just a little aside here. Like certain states have very strict gun laws, and certain states do not have strict gun laws. I know Maryland has some pretty strict gun laws, and Baltimore City and County have even stricter gun laws than the whole state does. So what
Yeah,
you're really looking at here is any change that the president makes with regards to this issue. I don't think it's going to do anything drastic. I mean, of
well,
course, changing the definition of a ghost gun is going to have an effect on how many ghost guns there are,
no. I
but
mean,
it's an artificial increase.
well, no. I mean, but the thing is that it is going to, if the rules are passed, which I think there's like less than 160 days before they go into effect. You won't be able to buy 80% receivers under the rules. Now, the whole point now I'm sure a lot of people just buy 80% receivers or equivalents just because it's somewhat fun because you because it's a more involved process than just than just going down to the store and buying a gun that's already there. You actually get to assemble it yourself, which I'm sure is fun for a lot of people. It's the same
It's like
philosophy
building your
behind
own
IKEA.
PC. You get to build your own AR to your own standards, what you need. Unlike buying
Yeah.
it like a pre-built where you're compromising what you want for what's available.
Yeah,
Uh,
but more importantly,
Much
it
as
has always been it has always been legal in this country for you to make your own firearm, right? And that's the way it should be. Okay, the federal government, the only time the federal government should be made aware somebody has a firearm is when they've committed a crime with it. You know, there's the whole idea that there is a national registry somewhere for where all these machine guns that were made for the under with the NFA because until pre 1984 or 86 you could buy a new machine gun and pay a tax for it and it would be transferable and after 1986 machine guns that you make aren't really transferable or I don't know exactly how that works but the idea that there's a list out there of every single machine gun, and that the feds know within a reasonable degree of certainty where those are, and the fact that there's a list of a whole bunch of 4473s out there that for every time you buy a firearm is absolutely insane. And the 80% and the whole purpose of 80% is a way of getting around that so that you can have a weapon that the feds don't know about. And it's not because necessarily you don't trust the feds, not although, we don't trust the feds. It's because it's none of their business. Okay? I mean,
I'm a
I'm sorry for sounding
Fed.
like a libertarian, but but it's none of the and also I mean, Biden's like you can't you couldn't own a cannon. Yes, you could. You we used
The,
privateers at the Revolution and the 1812 and
the one time Thomas Jefferson was actually cased when he authorized it.
Speaking of libertarians, this is my personal based accelerationist take on how we undo all these regulatory nightmares. That is that we actually do let the libertarians get into power, let them gut everything, and when the system just fails because they go too far, we can then just rebuild it from scratch in a way that actually makes sense.
Yeah, but then again, that would require a libertarian. That would actually mean that libertarians would actually have to become would actually have to get elected on any sort of national scale.
And become an actual
I
party.
can't. So I'm thinking about all of this, and I don't think it's going to. I don't think Biden's new gun control whatever is going to do much of anything to stop the legitimate issues, such as the insane black market for guns, gang members getting access to guns who shouldn't have them.
Yeah,
It's not going to do anything to solve the legitimate issue.
yeah, and okay, I don't want to sound okay. Never. What's that saying? Never attribute to malice what can be chalked up to ignorance. And a part of me really hopes that the government sincerely believes that doing this will crack down and will actually reduce the number of illegal whatevers. Okay,
I'll to
I
play
I
devil's advocate here and say that, oh, they know exactly what they're doing, but it's not because they think it'll stop illegal stuff. They're doing it to get elected and to look good
no, I
before
mean
the midterm election.
I mean I just don't think that they are comfortable with the notion of. I mean, maybe they're just uncomfortable with the notion of people actually having firearms that they don't know about. 2 times in one day. First the Culloden special, now here. We're gonna have to have a serious discussion with Craig. Okay, so as I was saying, uh, there's a YouTuber named John Doyle who's proposed a somewhat based he's somewhat based. He isn't explicitly pro-monarchist, and he also thinks that the founding fathers weren't an earlier stage of liberalism for some reason. He agrees that early that classical liberalism will eventually decay into current liberalism, but he doesn't see that the founding fathers were early stage of liberalism. Uh, but anyways, but he had this notion that until this new proposed rule change started to, Biden's like, yeah, we're gonna do it, man. Uh, I really subscribe to this notion that he proposed, which was that the government would never actually consider full out gun compensation because they want to keep the Second Amendment community, which I would like to consider myself a part of, entirely focused on keeping themselves armed and only concerned about the Second Amendment, right? Because if you have a whole bunch of guns, but you're only going to use those guns in defense of your right to have guns, that's that's kind of dumb, you know? I mean, that's I mean, it's having the Second Amendment isn't just for the sake of having the Second Amendment. It's supposed to be so that it's supposed to be that a well-regulated militia can overthrow the government, like the American Revolutionaries overthrew the government and the Whigs overthrew the. Anyways, the idea
Just like
is.
what Locke wanted. He wanted everybody to be able to overthrow every government.
Yeah, I support, one of the things I've said about the Russia thing recently is that instead of invading, what Putin should have done is he should have just counter-couped the allegedly US-backed couped Ukrainian government, and then we should have couped that government, and then he should have couped that government until eventually Ukrainian has had a turn at the top of ruling Ukraine. Now that's real democracy. But anyways,
I mean,
his
counterpoint to that, because you got to remember the State Department has all this soft power, and Russia has like almost zero soft power. So influencing a
we're
coup to
talking
happen
about
in a
democracy.
nation.
It doesn't have to be realistic.
Well,
Anyways,
yeah,
so sorry to digress, but essentially his main point was that the Second Amendment was a cope, and I'll have to remember to actually link to that video. And that really they aren't going to try to take mass gun compensation because they want to keep the Second Amendment community focused on purely defending its rights. Because nobody in the Second Amendment community is seriously considering actually taking up arms against the government for all the other crazy authoritarian unconstitutional stuff. And YouTube might strike us down for doing this, for me saying this, but first, then let me just say I'm not actually advocating for a violent overthrow of the government at this moment. And secondly, even if I was, which I'm not. You hear that, bots? It would be saying to go after the government for the unconstitutional stuff they do, which the Constitution trumps the laws which Congress and whatever passes. So, checkmate, YouTube. Um, so yeah, that was essentially his argument, and I think I still want to agree with that because the whole 80% thing is really annoying, and I think that we should have the rights to 80%. In fact, I think that every college student who wants to be an engineer, he has to have a project to go and buy an 80% and and actually put it together without instructions. Well, it'd be more useful than it'd be a better use of money than buying the textbook. But uh,
Honestly, truth, I'm in college classes right now, and I've maybe picked up and opened my textbook to actually do an assignment like 5 times in the past 2 semesters.
yeah, I mean, I don't know. We can joke about college textbooks some other time, seeing as how I'm going to be getting those soon. Ugh. Anyways, um,
I am
hey,
used, you'll
hey,
thank me
no,
later.
but yeah, buy them used and like get them off of Amazon on the cheap. That's what you always do. Like
I
look up the book number, and type it into Amazon because you can get way
I tend to
cheaper
be
than actually
thrifty.
at the university.
I tend
Unless
to be thrifty.
Unfortunately, that might not work sometimes because some professors will use an absolute custom edition where you are required to have
So-
like the CD that comes with the book.
Sometimes.
Yeah,
It really
sometimes
it depends on the courses that you're taking. Like typically, if you're taking a history major, you can get away with getting them off of Amazon because I've very rarely seen a professor actually have a custom textbook for a history course. For stuff like I had to take a communications class. Fuck, what was it called? I can't remember it off the top of my head, but yes, I had to buy the university specific textbook for that one. That was the only one in like 3 semesters of college.
And then there are those professors that will only allow you to use the textbook that they themselves wrote. I haven't had the privilege of having one of those, but how self-centered would you be to require students to use a textbook that
Ju-
you
Just
specifically
just
wrote?
just take some poli sci classes. That happens a lot.
Okay, maybe I'm being naive.
Fortunately, it didn't happen for me.
Maybe
But
well,
anyway,
just as the young, not quite college person yet, who's really reluctant, doesn't actually want to go to college. But could it possibly be that the teacher just really has really figured out exactly how to do the course and has designed the textbook around it?
No, it's because he's crazy.
Okay, well.
shall we move
Well,
on?
anyway, yeah, we should probably get back to the
Hey, a little thing about college advice in case anybody's listening. If you join like the reserve components of the military, your basic training and AIT give you a ton of credits. I literally got like a year and a half worth of college credits just from the military.
and you get to shoot things, right?
Yes, it's fun, and you actually learn how firearms actually work. Like
Wow.
you can't like pick up an AR and actually like shoot straight because the AR sights are specifically meant to be adjusted for every person's eye. So yeah, zeroing actually takes like a minute, but once it's zeroed, you should be able to pick it up and be just fine. Unless you're using an optics, then if you drop an optics, typically you have to re-zero it because it knocks it out of place. So yeah, for people that want some firearm advice, I am still currently in the military, so I know a lot of things, especially about AR platforms.
Reject expensive optics. Embrace welded iron sights. Um,
Anyway,
we're gonna party back. You know what? We're gonna give all the tankers M3 grease guns, and the paratroopers will have their M1 carbines, and apparently somebody made like essentially a modern semi-automatic BAR that you can hold with your hand. That's going to be our new battle rifle. This is the future. The FUD in me has decided 45 ACP will rise, and
Automatic BAR, that's just a M1 Garand with a 20 round magazine.
well, yeah, but they can. I'm
moving
sure if the
on.
military actually, for whatever reason, decided to adopt it, they could actually, make a full auto version. It's supposed to be for the civilian market, methinks. But anyways, yeah. Let's see. Does anybody have anything? Any more comments on Biden's new gun control-y
Absolutely
Civilians
not.
should not be able to make the stupid regulations on guns.
based? Let's see. The only gun control I support is preventing Fuds from getting, or for getting Bwubba from getting his hand on unique historical firearms that he will absolutely butcher. Um, I've seen too many. I've seen too many.
All right,
Well,
moving on to a current events topic that has come up in the past week or so. Elon Musk, car mogul, and just overall billionaire with tons of money.
Also, the richest African American.
Oh, interesting.
He's from South Africa.
Elon Musk has decided that he was going to pony up his $50 billion and go on a shopping spree and purchase a website called Twitter.
The mad
that-
lad is trying to buy Twitter. This is why I think that if anyone is actually an IRL Bond villain, it would be Elon Musk. The man is just off the wall.
Well, he doesn't dress in a nice suit, which just a side tangent about billionaires. Stop dressing in a t-shirt and jeans, okay? You're rich. You could afford a suit, okay?
I'm-
Like 100 years ago, it used to be the poor people would try to dress like the rich people. Now, the rich people are trying to dress like the poor people. Stop it.
I'm
I
Well,
rich.
am better dressed than some of these people. Except my stuff costs less but looks better because I wear a polo.
I mean,
Okay,
if
I'm sorry.
I'm gonna
So Musk,
stop
I
me.
believe Musk was denied purchase of Twitter?
oh boy, that's a development that I haven't heard about. But he put out an offer for like 54.2 billion.
So investment groups are buying up chunks of shares to keep him from taking the requisite control to own a majority of Twitter.
Bruh.
Mm-hmm.
That's
Yeah, they're. Go ahead.
apparently is that that poison pill I've been hearing so much about? When I saw the headline from like Tim Pool, I was like, is this some like I thought that was I didn't know that was an actual term, and then I looked it up and it's that CNN. The first article I see is a CNN article and it says poison pill.
Well,
The internet culture is now mainstream.
people like BlackRock have purchased shares in Twitter to keep Elon Musk from gaining a 50% control of the shares of the company.
What do they care? What do they get out of it?
They don't want
Because they
don't-
want to control everything.
I mean, I would really. Part of me does not care particularly one way or another because the only times I've ever actually used Twitter is when I've looked at the MOA Twitter. I never even posted anything. The most I've ever done is just check the notifications and make sure Will is acting aight. You see, because technically this is my job, but before it was my job, it was his job, so I just let him do the Twitter because I'm lazy.
And I do a good job. Thank you very much.
Yes.
Now, with that said, if Elon Musk decides in response to people like BlackRock buying shares to dump his, then basically everybody else will lose a whole lot of money.
Well, yeah, no, I mean, I think that was even the threat he made that if they don't take up his offer, he will reconsider his investment in Twitter or something.
I don't know if he could get in trouble with the I forget which government organization. I should know this. Which government organization?
The
Like
FCC,
the IRS.
The FCC. That's right.
the federal?
Communications Commission.
Or we think of the FTC, the Federal Trade. I don't know. There's too many alphabet agencies.
I think
Like-
it's
It's the
the FCC, but I'm wondering if he could get in trouble with the FCC for just intentionally and maliciously dumping his shares like that.
Well, I mean, if you have stock in a company, you have the right to get rid of those stocks if that company no longer agrees with your interest. I mean, for example, I'm going to assume Lego is publicly traded. I don't know, but let's just say it was, and I had stock in Lego. But then Lego comes out with their "Everyone is Awesome" set, so does that mean Hitler was awesome? Anyways, where it's like a gay pride whatever thing. Then I would have a right as a Catholic to say no and sell my shares because I don't want to fiscally support that company anymore.
Yeah, I don't disagree.
Well, no. So why wouldn't Elon Musk have that same right? Like if I mean 1 share or a million or
And the other question here is is Twitter's board, which offered Elon Musk a spot on said board in order to keep him from getting 51% of Twitter. Is Twitter's board acting in the interest of the shareholders by refusing to sell to Musk at such an upticked price?
I mean,
So they're mad that Musk is offering them more money than they should be worth?
Correct.
okay, I'm gonna
I
have
mean,
trouble
that it's
removing the swear
because
words.
so when it comes to BlackRock, all the other major investment firms that are they're all firms. They all have literally hundreds of investors, and by that they have a ton of members that want control over Twitter. So when Elon initially bought like 9% of the company, he became the largest holder in the company, which entitled him to a place on
Largest
the board.
single.
Well, yeah, the largest single,
largest-
but he's the largest. But like, if you were to break up BlackRock's investments and all these other investments, and then break them up amongst their actual members that want to maliciously control.
You're breaking up, Darth. We can't hear you.
Through information of the company,
Okay.
like nothing generous. So, like, it's a threat to their power. It's a threat to their dominance over the information space because Twitter does control a lot of the information communication, especially amongst government officials. Most government officials put out things on Twitter. They don't put them out on other platforms. You know, Twitter is actually one of the smaller ones in terms of member count. They put it out there because it's reliable, politically aligned with the regime, and it's overall just where they co-inhabit, where their message can easily go out and be controlled too, because the blue check marks be checking for dissidents at all times. Because if you check, all the people with blue check marks are either politicians, mass business owners that have interest in Twitter, or people with a rainbow flag behind their profile. So all people aligned with the regime. And then Elon Musk comes in, he's the only one that isn't in that sphere. He's an outsider.
I would like to take this moment to say that publicly trading companies is big dumb, and this is Exhibit A of why it should never be allowed. This has been your local distributist propaganda.
Well, I think all estates should be owned by aristocrats again.
Yeah, what?
Well, we can only do so much with what little time we may have on this earth. And
Let us dream, Victor.
yes,
I want to dream.
just as
Rome
an
wasn't
aside,
built in a day.
yes, I am painfully aware. And shall we move on? Because I'd like to bring something up before we go to our next official topic, if I may do that.
All right.
I want to make one last comment. The House
Go ahead,
of
Rob.
Thurn und Saxon was given the imperial monopoly over the postal service in the Holy Roman Empire. They should also have the monopoly over Twitter, Facebook, other media platforms.
I mean, I mean, email is. I mean, at the very least, email. I mean, come on, man.
All right, so okay, so the point that I wanted to make, was that this weekend is a whole slew of important anniversaries, two of which we will get into later on in the show. But the one thing that I wanted to bring up is that tomorrow, as we are recording this, we are recording on Good Friday, is the anniversary of the Battle of Culloden. Now, for those of you that subscribe to our YouTube channel, you will have already seen the Culloden special episode because you will have checked your notifications after you click the notification bell to receive them, and you will have listened to our Culloden special. For those of you that are listening to us live right now on our Discord server, you may not have had the opportunity to listen to our Culloden special. Be on the lookout for that tomorrow at noontime Eastern. Anyway, we will also commemorate Good Friday in our closing prayer at the end of the show. And with the first anniversary that we would like to bring up as a topic, here is William Stout. Will.
The first anniversary of. Wait, sorry,
The Confederacy. He wants you to talk about the surrender of the Confeds.
Oh,
The Confeds.
okay.
The Confeds.
I was
the
scrolling through the conference text chat to see what people were saying, and I didn't have the list in front of me. Sorry about that. All right, the surrender of the Confederacy. It is. Let's see, it's 22, and it was in 65. So
Yeah.
it's and almost just over. You know what? I'm not gonna bother to do the math. But,
I'll do the math while you talk.
recently, the anniversary of the surrender of the Confederacy happened, and
157.
and you know, when it comes to partisan politics, the Civil War seems to be a very big root on the issue, especially of who is who, as both parties try to jockey for basically being the legacy of Lincoln. Of course, the Republicans say Lincoln was the first Republican president, in which case he was, and of course, the Democrats claim to follow in the values of Lincoln, of equality and justice and all that shebang. And it seems that the Civil War is increasingly more and more relevant as time goes on, instead of getting less relevant and becoming something in the past, because the ghost of how do I want to say this? But the legacy of the Civil War is still very, very relevant in politics today, even though the conflict long ago ended.
Well, I mean, it is. I mean, with the whole Lincoln thing, the first party that advocates for suspending habeas corpus is the true successor of Lincoln. Anyways,
Also, the
Um,
first president to endorse Karl Marx again will be the true successor of Lincoln.
Can never endorse Karl Marx. Karl Marx, like Lincoln didn't care at all about Karl Marx.
I don't
No,
know, man.
Lincoln did write a letter to Karl Marx upon the publication of the Communist Manifesto, giving critique but also admiring portions of it. So,
It
just
is.
saying.
It is. It is so weird when you learn about these different things in history that you segment internally in your brain, and then you remember that Marx was like a thing at the time. Apparently, it was common in the wild. Apparently, in Wild West towns, you were more likely to hear about Marx than you were to actually have a classic Wild West duel, because those are apparently a lot, most of the time, inventions of storytellers. But
Hollywood.
No. So yeah. So I mean, but with the whole Civil War thing, the biggest repercussion, and this is something where I would turn to Puritan's Empire, a Catholic perspective on American history, which I will also try to remember to link in the description. One of Charles Colombe's based books, which is I finally decided to put on a bookshelf where with some of my other history text. Um, it- that what okay, the biggest legacy of the Civil War, at least one of them, the biggest legacy, at least one of them, one of the legacies of the Civil War is that from that point on, there was really only one class, as it were, that was in charge, like of the main of like how the country worked, right? So before the Civil War, you had essentially the southern that sort of aristocratic southern landed gentry that was had some influence, and then you had the northern industrialist, and of course, eventually that northern industrialist class eventually transitioned into the media slash business in general tycoons that are really running the show today. But the Civil War essentially sort of crushed that notion uh, of having two or more classes. And then another thing with the Civil War is that the country was a lot more centralized as a result. Now, yes, one of the main things the Civil War was fought over was slavery. I'm not going to pretend any different. But there was also and I would say a legitimate fear from some of the states that seceded about federal encroachment in other areas of of the country. And you know, and the given that we did become a much more centralized nation. It used to be we would say the United States are, because hypothetically we're a collection of sovereign states that are voluntarily forming ourselves into one larger government. After the war, it became the United States is, which language and how we refer to things is a very important aspect of how society views things, and I think that that is indeed uh, one of the bigger takeaways of the war. So
I think the big thing that Lincoln really did is the prior to the Civil War, the president could be a very powerful unifying figure, but after the Civil War and the things that happened during the Civil War with Lincoln, it started to also expand the power of the presidency, and as well as expand the centralization and continued growth of power in the federal government. And I would say that the peaking and growth of the presidency and its powers really came into maturity under FDR. But
Sure.
with Lincoln and the aftermath, we start to see the presidency stop being such of a unifying office as much of it becoming a competitive office. And the modern dichotomy of the parties that are in the U.S. government and in U.S. politics fighting over the presidency really takes form after the Civil War.
The last president that didn't really see himself as a quasi monarch, I think, was Coolidge. And they call him Silent Cal for a reason.
he was keeping it cool.
Well,
Yes.
no reason to really intervene. The economy was great. U.S. in post World War One 20s was the height it was ever been. It was almost considered a peak society.
Well,
And
minus
then it
all the
crashed very violently.
Well, interesting thing about that has nothing to do with the Civil War. Apparently, the Roaring Twenties were sort of a product of the same sort of boom that artificial boom that the Feds like to cause, where they'll lower the interest rates artificially because for some reason we give the federal government the power to set interest rates. I don't know why. And then once they lower the interest rates, people will artificially start taking out more. Will artificially start buying things because then investing isn't as profitable as it was. But then eventually that stops. So the businesses will expand to meet this new demand. But then that artificial demand starts to go away, and then the businesses are in danger of losing money because many of them took out loans to sort of expand their operations. So the Feds lower interest again, and the cycle repeats until eventually they don't do that anymore, and then there's a crash as all these companies can't meet their debts, and
Well,
this is sort of how we got the housing bubble, and also this is apparently what happened with the 1920s.
Well, the Fed doesn't lower interest rates. The Fed loans the biggest banks money. And when the Fed does that, they set a base interest rate. And those banks will lend out money for a little bit higher interest rate, and the banks beneath them will lend out the money they got for a little bit higher interest rate. And basically, they're not setting an interest rate that everyone has to abide by. They're just setting the floor for the interest rate.
Which, correct me if I'm wrong, when every time they do this, that gets progressively lower. So overall interest rates keep going down. And then, anyways. We'll let Dar
Okay,
speak,
well,
because
the
anyways.
Fed might raise. Well, the Fed might raise. Go ahead, Dorf.
Oh, I was just gonna say, you know what Jose Antonio de Rivera would say to this? Nationalize all the banks under the state, because it's unjust to make to have these loans at high rates, because it just steals the wealth of the entire society by forcing interest upon them.
I would say reject private bank and state bank. Make church handle loans for the poor, and then also reject a central bank, embrace royal mint.
You want to know what the most cringe economic take I've ever heard was? It came from my engineering teacher.
That the engineers should run the banks?
No, he said that inflation is a good thing because as money inflates, wages go up and everything goes up, but the amount of money you borrowed stays the same. So basically, your house payment gets cheaper.
Okay.
That was the most economic take I've ever.
To paraphrase Charles Colomb, that's sort of like saying your neighborhood got firebombed, but at least you don't have to deal with that annoying neighbor anymore. I mean, what?
And I hear that statement, and I think about how the housing market is right now, and how basically the cost of housing is absurd in the U.S. because there's a shortage and everything's so expensive. And I just think it's like that is the most boomer statement I've ever heard. Of course, he said that. He's the one that's making the money off of it.
He's the one who already has a house.
Hey, I'll just point this out to people about the housing market. In the United States, there's only about a 60% homeownership rate. In Russia, where they don't have this very predatory banking system, they have 90% homeownership rate.
To be fair, Russia also has a lot less people and they have a lot more rural open space to own houses too. I don't necessarily care that people own their own houses. I'm okay with people living in apartments, but living in an apartment shouldn't be as expensive as it is in the US either.
Reject urbanization.
Intergenerational wealth is better.
Yes, generational wealth is better. But just a clarification on a point that was made earlier tonight. The Federal Reserve does not print money. That is the Mint. That is, I believe, the Treasury Department through the U.S. Mint in 6 different locations throughout the countries.
Right. The Federal Reserve maintains and controls the flow of money.
Either way,
highest bank in the US. If like the big investment banks need to take a loan, they take a loan from the Fed. And the Fed actually makes money for the US government. I forget how much money the Fed makes, but the Fed makes like $200-300 billion a year for the Treasury.
Which would be impressive if it wasn't for the fact that we were spending $4 trillion annually. Before
That's Congress's fault, not the Fed's.
Yeah, well, no, I mean, I don't know. The whole thing is that reject fiat currency and embrace stable gold standard, where a buck today is worth a buck tomorrow, and a buck for I should be able
or base your currency based off the output of labor of your people.
You see, I have a simple idea, and that is that we base currency off of, base the price of goods off of the amount of energy it takes to produce a good, and we make a commodity currency that's backed by the kilowatt hour.
I mean
What?
that
I understand it, but
that's like it's not
that's
necessarily practical now, but it could be in the future.
Yes, but
I mean, that would have to be like
only the
you'd see
robots would take
prices
advantage.
changing every day then.
That'd be like what?
it'd be prices changing every single day in that case.
I mean, prices change every single day right now, too. Ideally, it'd be a society where energy wouldn't necessarily be an issue at the time, and so the price of energy wouldn't necessarily fluctuate and stay somewhat constant, and that would make it a whole lot easier.
Well, I mean,
Population,
But
overpopulation requires more money.
well, no. Well, yeah, I mean, with the gold standard,
no.
no, it doesn't. I mean, no. I mean, this is the thing, right? So if you have a dollar gold coin, or no, let's say you have fiat currency where magically the government never actually inflates it, and every time a dollar bill is taken out of circulation because it's like damaged or whatever, they insert one new dollar bill in, and so okay, yes, eventually as the population grows and it becomes cheaper to to get things, you're going to be paying less eventually, but there's still, I mean, the overall wealth hasn't necessarily, I don't know. The whole relation between wealth and currency is sort of odd, given that we like to discuss wealth in purely currency terms when the currency itself fluctuates. Like, for example, uh, I a radio used to, if you bought a brand new radio, that would mean that you were very wealthy. But now owning a radio doesn't necessarily add a whole lot to your wealth. Like this clock radio thing, that's also an alarm clock and a very cheap Bluetooth speaker, was like $20, which even discounting inflation is way cheaper than the hundreds you would have paid for a radio back in the 20s when they first became popular. So I
The
don't
main
know.
thing with the gold standard is there isn't physically enough gold on the planet to make it practical.
Well,
That's why,
I mean, if
like,
you want to pay 20
it
cents a
depends
paper,
on the nation specifically. Like, Germany couldn't be World War One. They had their entire gold supply stolen by the Western Allies.
well, yeah, it also
I'm
it
very
also
bitter
could
about
help.
that.
And we have invited
Oh,
Crochet Undying. He had some comments about us misinterpreting the gold standard, so the floor is yours.
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, we
Yes.
can use.
yes.
Right. So basically, the issue is as basically there's a finite amount of gold, and it's especially finite at this point because we've mined a ton of it already. And basically, the only way for a gold standard to work, especially nowadays, like we basically doubled the global population in like less than 100 years. Like you guys realize that. So basically, the only way to effectively run that you'd actually have to constantly reevaluate how much gold your currency is worth, or increasingly switch out the bills in circulation for smaller denomination bills. So you'd still have to constantly meddle with it anyway. Like there's really no way around that when the population grows as fast as it does now.
And eventually you get to the point where the money is just worth the same amount as the fiat currency because it'd have to be backed by such a small denomination or small quantity of gold in the first place.
Thank you very
Yeah.
much for the Thank you very much for the explanation. If anyone else has any thoughts on this whole topic of, I don't even know what we were even supposed to be talking about at this point. It's that we went from the Confederacy to somehow money.
Well, okay, so it's like we start with the Confederacy. I made a habeas corpus joke, then made the point about federal centralization. Will also made a point about federal centralization. Somehow Roaring Twenties, explanation of the government meddling with the currency. I don't know. All I'm saying is, I think gold standard may be flawed, but it's the prettiest system we have because coins are shiny. Reject gold standard because of
Or
economic
we can go to
practicality. Embrace gold
feudalism.
standard because of shiny. I like
We
feudalism.
can go back to feudalism because then land is
Oh,
the determiner of your wealth.
yeah. We don't. I mean, yeah. Reject money economy and embrace embrace what you actually make being your
I'm just gonna make this comment, but since the petrodollar is already a thing, can't we just back our currency in barrels of oil?
yeah. But oil. I don't know. Then the Saudis might just dump. If the Saudis decide they don't like us, then they can just dump billions of extra gallons on the market. Like they've already. I mean, the Saudis have intentionally caused crashes before when other countries got upstarty. Apparently, one of the things that added to Venezuela's economic crisis, besides their mismanagement of their economy, was the Saudis dumping oil onto the market to help to just crush the Venezuelans. Um, it's just good business.
It's just good business.
All right.
We have a final topic for tonight.
Yes, we
Yes.
do. We do. The today, as we're recording this, is the 110th,
10th.
I believe.
110th.
Yes, 110th anniversary of the sinking of the RMS Titanic, such named because it was carrying mail. The RM stood for Royal Mail.
Yes.
The Titanic was the largest vessel for the time, and it is still to this day the largest single peacetime ship sinking casualty event in human history.
It's still the largest.
Yeah.
I mean,
That means
there hasn't really been a whole lot since then. I mean, Lusitania maybe, but it's like not in terms of population that was actually on Lusitania compared to the Titanic, because Lusitania was mostly carrying ammunition, not tourists.
Yeah,
Oh.
I used to when I was going through my America doesn't do anything. America and the English here in general can't do anything wrong phase. I unironically denied that there was that the Lusitania was carrying weapons or whatnot. Despite the fact that it had been proven by Dr. Robert Ballard at that point.
Oh,
I
and
was a weird child.
the Duke of
And of
York
course,
wants to say that today is also the 3rd anniversary of the Notre Dame fire.
Oh,
yes, the fire that was
yeah.
the fire. You were saying, Darth? Sorry, I cut you off.
Oh no, I was about to cuss, but then I like caught myself, so you
Yeah,
don't have to edit out.
because
Yes.
remember I censor that stuff.
Right. So, and in case anybody needs a refresher, of course, if you need a refresher, I have no idea why. I have no idea where you've been. If you've been living on a rock, or you've just been caught up with
Have
other
you
news topics.
have you not been watching
Or if you're
our previous
Protestant and you're
Monarchist Minute episode where
anti-Catholic.
we actually
Anyway,
have you not been
the
watching our previous Monarchist Minute episode where we actually brought up the Notre Dame thing when they were going to make it ugly? I
of
think that's
course,
still the plan.
and if you want to go back and reference that, a link to that episode will probably be in the description. Anyway,
Probably not. I
the-
forgot which one it is, so
okay,
I'd have to be lazy.
all right, so for those of you who need a refresher, the Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris, France, caught on fire 3 years ago today at the time of this recording. And it was,
Under suspicious circumstances.
yes, under suspicious circumstances, but the investigation has officially ruled it as a fire in an oak tree, and the oak structure of the building at the top of the building, the roof. I think it officially reported as an accident.
It was officially, but I don't trust the French Republic on anything. I don't trust republics because they feel very anti-clerical. So, and this one especially is very, very, very anti-clerical. The Fifth Republic.
Yeah. Let's see. So I don't know.
Anything
Carrying
else?
Well, I guess as a huge former Titanic nerd. Speaking of Lego, Lego made this beautiful Titanic set that even if I could afford it, unfortunately, I don't think I would buy it because once again, Lego is big, big. They're very pro homosexual now, and that makes me sad. Reject modern Lego.
Well, they
Embrace
are
classic
based out
Lego.
of Denmark.
Yeah, oh yeah,
They are
they're
based
kind
out
of
of Denmark.
yeah. Don't look
Which
into what they do for their children.
yeah.
So it's
But
really
anyway,
very.
I was gonna make. I mean, comparing the two tragedies. I don't think anybody died in Notre Dame did with the fire, did it?
Died in Notre Dame,
No.
maybe
No.
except for maybe countless architects that died inside.
Oh, oh, they died inside with the horrible thing. Well, so yeah. That whole tragedy. But at the very least, with Notre Dame, eventually, a future generation of clerics will come in and say, "Yeah, we ain't doing that," and if they had to go under the nose of the French government, uh, they had to go under the nose of the French government in order to fix it. I'm sure they will because, but but I mean but comparing Notre Dame to Titanic, like in terms of lies, obviously Titanic was worse. Um, but at the very least, Notre Dame could be rebuilt properly. But it's actually sort of impressive how
It
Notre Dame
won't.
did. Well, I mean, maybe not in our lifetime, but it's actually sort of impressive how how uh it's sort of impressive how Notre Dame, like its ceiling, did exactly what it's supposed to do because apparently back in the olden days, church fires were somewhat common because when you're the highest building in the city, you tend to get struck by lightning. So it's interesting to see how the roof behaved exactly as the medievals thought it would, which tells you something when a lot of modern architects design these buildings that one look hideous and two fall apart all the time. It's almost like they used to build things better back when they thought that permanence was something important. Anyways, um,
Um,
anyways, but I mean Titanic. Titanic. It, it,
do you think Titanic could qualify as a lesson in hubris, considering they considered the ship to be unsinkable?
well, they considered it to be practically unsinkable. The idea is
Oh,
that they never thought that many watertight compartments would realistically be flooded at once. The circumstances. Um, so this was back when I was really into Titanic. Titanic, and I don't know if this guy was. He was giving a lecture, so I'm going to assume he was a okay, even though I don't know that for certain. I can't remember the guy, but he's like, yeah, if Titanic hit the iceberg, um, the Titanic hit the iceberg head on, then it would have been fine. But also the embarrassment of you ran a brand new ship into an iceberg. But also the regulations at the time used to state that when you were in an ice patch, the correct thing to do would be to run through the ice field as fast as possible, to avoid the danger. But that sort of notion was back in the days when ships were still made out of wood, and with the in the modern day, well, modern day of 1912, the exact opposite was probably true. So it was. In a sense, it's humorous, hubris, I guess, because that whole practically unsinkable thing. But at the same time, they weren't intentionally building anything unsafe. With the lifeboat thing, I guess another assumption was if the ship was actually sinking, they assumed that another ship would be close enough by so you could ferry men and children back and forth.
Of which
Um,
there was, but there was no one at the radio station at the time.
Well, yeah, because the guy went to bed. So yeah, the whole thing. I guess you could say hubris. And I'm sure there was hubris. I'm sure.
hubris and a gross violation of what would normally be seen as common sense.
Well, no. I mean, that was. I mean, the
Well,
rules at the time, that was the common sense. I mean,
Well, if you would like another story on hubris, read the Tower of Babel in Genesis.
that too. No, I mean, I mean, I'm not saying that the people who designed the ship did everything right. Obviously they didn't. Otherwise, Titanic wouldn't have become the famous ship it was. It probably would have been sunk in the First World War as a as a hospital ship. I don't know. It may have been sunk in the First World War, being hit by a mine or a torpedo or whatever you want to believe about the Britannia or the Britannic, or sunk in World War II, or scrapped in the 30s with the Depression. But I don't think that the designers of Titanic deserve as much criticism as we give them, because they were following all the rules. And if you look at the assumption of the time, if you look at like what they were thinking, it's all logical. Um,
Yeah, you
it's
can't.
just with the benefit of hindsight, we know it's
I mean, yeah, you can't blame a car manufacturer for running a car straight into a brick wall. So no, you can't blame the people who built the Titanic for the crew running it straight through an ice field.
Yeah, well, I mean, and also, I mean, the one thing I will say, I think they had inferior quality rivets, but I don't think that was known at the time. So I mean that's the one thing, but I mean, I don't think I'm not an expert, so maybe if it had rivets that were up to snuff, I don't know. I think it would have.
What
I don't know. I'm going to assume it would have.
for a rivet to be up to snuff?
I think the rivets were brittle, or am I mistaking that for a Great Lakes freighter with its steel? But I think the rivets were just too. I think the rivets were brittle, so they weren't. Yeah, I don't know. It's been a while since I really had to like a deep nerdy dive into the whole Titanic thing. But I think that we give the people who were in charge a lot of I don't know, a lot of thing. I mean, hindsight's 2020, man. I mean, it's not it's never really as clear cut as we say it is, you know. And if the people had that hindsight, if you walked back to Ismay or whoever and said, "Okay, boys, this is what's going to happen," then they would have been like, "Okay, firstly, the form of English you speak is drastically inferior. We'll have to send you to a grammar school. Secondly, thank you, kind future person. Thirdly, why did you break reality to do this?" Uh, I mean, I think that if you pointed out, I think if you pointed, I mean, like, if you showed them a VHS tape, firstly they get over they they wonder how to actually play it, but they would have corrected the errors in procedure. I mean, I don't know. All I'm trying to say is, and I'm waffling on, uh, don't apply. Look at it through the perspective that they were looking at it, and then it will make more sense. I can't believe I took like 10 minutes to say that.
I know there's
And
a
of course,
political drama going on behind the scenes because a lot of the was the sectarian issues in Belfast at the time that would eventually lead to the Irish Civil War and the troubles in Ireland were taking place, such as the people who owned the dockyard that the Titanic were built were Protestant, but most of the dock workers were Irish Catholic.
Oh, well, it, I didn't know I didn't know that. I thought, being Belfast, there at least a fair number of the dock workers would have been Protestants themselves, like from, like, being Ulster Scots or whatever. Uh, but no, and there's also all these things that, like, oh, Titanic was cursed because a worker got trapped in the ship during construction, or something. Uh, which, yeah, I mean, honestly, I don't. Well, I've said it before. When it comes to things I'm not supposed to, when it comes to things besides Catholic dogma, I'm a little skeptical of believing anything like that, and especially in that case. But uh, I mean, mean, I don't know. I think the Titanic is a great example of people, realizing what could have gone wrong. I mean, realizing what did go wrong, and they fixed it, because we never had an incident like Titanic again, and they fixed unfortunately, I don't really know if there was ever a time where requiring that all those lifeboats, having enough lifeboats for everybody plus a few or whatever on their ship, actually truly came in handy. Yeah, it was a tragedy, but we learned from that tragedy. So in a way, I guess you could say that it was something that shouldn't have happened, but at the very least, some good came out of it.
All right. So do you think we should wrap up?
Do we have any last minute thoughts? The Titanic looked
Well,
pretty.
so going kind of about Notre Dame, pray that Macron does not get reelected because his plans for Notre Dame are, quite frankly, diabolical. So,
What does he
I
want to do?
don't like what. Well, he wants to make it like a postmodern, conta absolute monstrosity of a cathedral, because technically all church property is owned by the French state in the French Republic. So not even the church gets to decide how to rebuild it. It's up
All
to
church
the
property built before all church property built before a certain date.
Yeah.
well,
Which in
yes.
yeah. Well,
Also, so like I know Le Pen is kind of cringe, but she's not as cringe as Macron, and she probably would the Notre Dame traditional architecture. Pray. I know we're in the United States, but pray that she gets elected in France.
wait. What about that guy who was the son of Algerian Frenchman?
No,
Uh
he's out because he only got
oh,
10% of the votes in the first round. Le Pen
who?
got 24, Macron got 26. So if the
The French,
by the
what?
way,
Go ahead,
it's the
Dorf.
first round. It's the first round of the French elections. So the way that the French presidential elections work is they have a first round, which unless a candidate gets 51%, then they take the top two candidates, and then they have them square off in the second round of elections, and then that's who gets elected as their president. Which honestly I think is a slightly better system, because in the United States we unfortunately only have a system where you don't have two candidates at most unless we win any election. I hate elections, period, but I would say the French one is slightly better. Also, hope that all the communists don't vote for Macron, because frankly they don't like Macron, and it may actually drive them to vote for Le Pen or just not show up for the election. So yeah, there's that too. Because the communists
That
did
sounds
make
like
up like a 14%.
that
Oh,
seems like a
go
very
ahead.
superior way.
You said that seems like a sophisticated, I think.
You talking to me?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm talking to you.
Yeah, I said that does seem like a superior way to vote for a president. That way you have more options to pick. And that could also solve the issue in the US of party primaries if everyone gets to run and then we just take the top 2 or 3 candidates and then have them run against each other in a secondary election.
Well,
Yeah,
in
but
France they have to be sponsored by a party too. Like that's also the requirement. There's no independent candidates. So like a candidate can
Kind of
make their own party, and like they can make their own party though, like literally days before the election, and just say, "I'm the head of this party, so I'm running as for
I'm
under
the
my
head of the
party."
political apathy party. Vote for me so you don't have to vote again.
I Yeah, that's legitimately it. So yeah, like hopefully like pray that Le Pen does well in the second rounds. I think it's at the end of April that's gonna happen. So that way we can get cringe Macron out.
And make Macron a snack food again.
Yes.
Oh wait,
So,
that's a macaroon, or I don't know. I can't remember.
Whatever.
okay.
All right.
So
We have some
I
breaking news.
We have some
breaking
breaking news.
news.
I like
Okay.
breaking news.
Okay. So, um, Russia's sunken warship, the Black Sea Fleet flagship, may have, I must stress, may have, we don't have any confirmation that it did. It may have carried a piece of the true cross upon which our Lord was crucified on the first Good Friday.
Oh boy.
If that's true, then we need to recover that.
ASAP. I thought you guys were gonna talk about how the Pentagon says, yeah, we think that the Ukrainians did it. It's like, of course you guys think the Ukrainians did it.
But
Whoever, and I, at this point, I am speaking personally, not on behalf of any organization. I'm speaking personally now. Quite frankly, I don't care who sunk that ship. It
Yeah.
is the moral duty, not a moral nicety at this point. A moral duty for someone to go
recover.
into the vessel to recover that relic of the true cross and preferably give it to the Vatican, but
Yeah.
if
Or
it
base
was,
Eastern Catholic.
well,
the
if it was in
Patriarch of Moscow is still pretty trustworthy. Just saying.
Yeah, I don't know.
I already say that he's the guy that ordered it being put on a boat in an active war zone anyway.
Well,
mean-
I mean, they at least still have this concept of divinity in Russia, unlike us, we're a bunch of cringe materialists.
Yeah, I mean,
Oh,
like when priests would say mass, back when we used to actually, have saints' relics, in altar stones, military chaplains would carry.
We still do in some. We still do
Well,
on
yeah,
some altars. We still do.
well, a lot of them were removed because it was morbid or something, because they thought it was morbid or whatever. But anyways, chaplains used to carry a little relic whenever they set up mass. Of one of the saints. So I mean, in that sense, I kind of understand. I mean, I might understand why they did that, but at the same time, that if a set part of the true cross of Christ was on that ship, then yeah, that's not. Then somebody call a ceasefire or do whatever you need to do, because
I mean,
So
some
I think
like
the ship was actually sunk in a bay, so it actually is
yeah. So I
not
don't.
like at the
Did
bottom of somewhere.
Yeah, I heard the ship sunk. Like, is it one of those like sinks in shallow water, so it's still like above, partly above water kind of sinkings, or is it actually?
I believe so because I believe it was docked, and it's possibly from what I've heard, it's possibly a sabotage mission by Ukrainian special forces, which were trained by Green Berets and SEALs, and also British SAS and SBS. So I wouldn't
I
doubt
thought
they at least have the knowledge how to plant an explosive on a hull warship.
I thought the Ukrainians were claiming that they had missiles, and the Russians were claiming it's an engine fire or something, or not an engine fire, but a fire that broke out.
Russian.
Okay, in either case,
It's the fog of war.
Yeah, we don't.
yes, and in either case, it literally does not matter.
Yeah,
If a part of the true cross was on that ship, so I don't care who it is, they have a moral duty to recover that relic.
Something similar actually happened during the Third Crusade. Apparently, the Crusaders had the full True Cross, like the entire True Cross, supposedly. I was watching a documentary on this. because they were talking about the piece of the True Cross that was in Rome, and they were talking about how the Third Crusaders had the actual entirety of the full Third Cross, and they were just sitting there carrying it around with them while they were fighting Saladin, and eventually they got beat. And then, instead of doing the smart thing, would be keeping that thing somewhere safe where nothing can hurt it, they carried it in the battle, and it ended up being captured by the Muslims, and the Muslims decided to use it for firewood.
Oh,
So, my
this.
point is, why are we taking priceless holy relics into a combat zone in the first place?
I mean,
Well, I'm
It
just
isn't
going to say
without.
this now. Back then, the warrior culture was far more divine back then. Like knights would carry small relics with them. Lords, kings, even bishops would go into battle. Like there was literally you could literally look up bishop armor from the Middle Ages. The the battlefield was as fine as a being in a cathedral or being, you know, you had to have that connection with the divine to survive the battle. So I I don't blame them because like I'm not a materialist. I'm very much the metaphysics of things. I am the material. Carrying the cross, like according to their minds, like they are carrying the protection and the blessing of God with them. So yeah, I'm just saying.
yeah.
No, it's just me that feels like, they should be somewhere safe when you're sure nothing bad's gonna happen to them.
Well, I guess maybe with the True Cross, but like but at the very least, chaplains should have relics with them when they say mass and like a makeshift place in the middle of a battlefield because it's what you do, man. It's your. I mean, I think the prayers were partly asking for I mean at the very least it's a reminder to ask for the intercession of whatever particular saint's relics you have there. So I mean
Also, we should do what the Russians do and just carry a beautiful painting of Our Lady in battle.
yes
Carry the icon of Mary around. Yeah, I agree with that. That's an acceptable holy aesthetic for battle.
yeah man it,
Priceless, irreplaceable artifact, no.
Also, Michael on top of tanks. Just
yes
saying.
I mean yeah no I mean it's like the Russian I don't know Eastern. I mean I'm obviously a Roman Rite Catholic, but Eastern Catholic and Orthodox icons are just like are so beautiful, and when they actually like would actually put those on like battle standards, it's like they get it. I mean
Well,
And,
it's like you
and
should like go ahead.
does anybody? I was gonna let you make your point. Does anybody else have anything else on this topic? Because I think we should probably start wrapping up.
I want to make a point. Why can't we make a cathedral to the armed forces in America? Come on, guys. Russia's beating us. Like they have built an
I,
absolutely
because
beautiful. Building.
perfectly honest, I've seen the clips of that cathedral. That cathedral is gorgeous. I mean, I would like to see a little more
And
greenery
it
in the
only
corner, but other than that, it's beautiful.
and it only took 2 years to build. Come on, like what
Oh,
was this taking
they
100 years to build a cathedral thing?
it
yeah
took
Well, I'm talking
they
about the
did.
modern day.
yeah
What's it made of? If I don't
I don't
mind.
know.
The new cathedral that Russia built.
Yeah,
It's pretty much like a traditionally built cathedral. Just they did use like battle, essentially, artifacts from like battles. Like they took like Wehrmacht tank treads and like forged them down big iron doors, and they like took just a lot of like stuff that they got from the Great Patriotic War and melted it down like for the sculpts in the
that's
cathedral.
actually
So they integrate the battlefield into the cathedral itself. And I think honestly, like if we wanted to do that, we could do something similar in 2 years, but that would require, of course, a conversion of Americanism. Come on, guys, hurry up on that.
Yes, America converting Catholicism. Man, it's
Yep.
is this? I assume it's green because it's made of a bunch of.
I mean, yeah, we wouldn't be able. We have a bunch of cast iron cannons sitting around everywhere. We have them at old forts and everything. And to be quite frankly honest, it always confused me why we keep them around instead of.
Because they look cool, man. I mean, don't you know that the city hall needs a cannon to make sure that you pay your city taxes?
They look.
And of course, our historian in residence, Vincent, if you're listening, shout out to you, could also come up with a couple of reasons why we keep the cannons.
Because they're cool. I
I
mean,
know in Gettysburg they intentionally keep the cannons because they represent the artillery regiments that were at Gettysburg, but
I don't know. I'm just saying that
Yeah,
every
but
town.
why does a small town in like North Dakota need a cannon randomly somewhere?
Well, I mean,
Or like a
I mean,
hunting sometimes.
I mean, all I'm saying is that the way that in my alternate history, I know that makes me sound like a larper, but the alternate history I'm writing to try to explain what my ideal American monarchy would look like. Each town and if there isn't a town, each county has its own militia. So where each of the male citizens who obviously isn't like a priest or whatever has to have like a weapon. So I guess in that sense, each town having in ye olden days of like the 17 and 1800s having at least one cannon would make sense because the local militia needs something a little more than just the weapons.
I mean today it's easier. We just need state issued bazookas.
Like
I,
World War II bazookas.
I'm also shamelessly writing an alt history as well. But it's more
He's
like
a little
my
further
ideal
along in the
ideal
process.
America. I'm also on the second draft of the
Maybe
first
what we
book,
should do.
guys.
Okay. Maybe what we should do. Maybe what we should do is that I should like Hurley try to pen together mine, and then we can write each other's forwards, and then it's going to be I don't know this guy. Who and, see. So we're giving each other mutual credibility while not giving ourselves credibility at all. I like it.
So
All right.
does anybody have anything else to bring up tonight, or can we wrap up?
August Steiner made a funny comment I just want to point out real quick. Fun
Okay.
fact, the original name of the Moskva was Slava, meaning glory, from its launch in the 70s until the 90s. And an old Greek and Roman
Mythology.
superstition was you should not rename a ship because it angers Poseidon. Or in his Roman name, Neptune. And what was the name of the missile that Ukraine supposedly used to sink the ship? It was a Neptune missile.
Dun
All
dun
right,
dun.
and
All right,
with,
well, Vic,
and with
plug the social medias.
and with that, there was something else that we wanted to
Oh.
bring up, but we never
yeah.
actually did.
Oh, wait,
And Charles, because it is in your home state of Michigan, you take the lead.
Oh, yeah, there was a shooting in Grand Rapids that we were gonna originally tie in with the gun control discussion. And I know nothing else because I wasn't the one who raised the topic in the first place.
I think I was actually, yeah.
Yeah.
I forgot about it too. Basically, I sat down and watched the footage, and the only thing I have to say is, where was that cop's partner? Because that cop was there alone, and no police officer should ever be trying to detain a suspect alone.
Yeah.
And on that note, I'm going to plug the social medias. For those of you watching us on YouTube, welcome. If you would like to interact with us, you can join our Discord server. Linkity-link is in the description down below, along with our organizational social media pages. If you would like to listen live, you can join us Fridays at 8 p.m. Eastern in our Discord server. With that in mind, I will hand you back to Charles.
All right. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Ghost, amen. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Amen. We
Amen.
adore you, O Christ, and we praise you, for by your holy cross you have redeemed the world. Amen. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Ghost, amen.